Here with Tim Cordill, NCAA Umpire, owner, CEO of Ump App, and also Director of Umpire Culture Recruitment and Training and Retention at Perfect Game. So, Tim, thanks for jumping on with me.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
We go way back, and I do want to dive in a little bit on your path. What drew you to umpiring?
I started when I was 12, so I don't think there was child labor laws back then like there is now. But the guy who coached our baseball team also ran the umpires, and he goes, "Hey, this would be a great job. Why don't you and some buddies come out?" And I thought, man, sounds like a pretty good gig to me. I'm going to make more money than my friends who are washing dishes or throwing a paper route, and I get to make my own schedule. So that's what ultimately drew me to it. And it's like anything else in life, right? I mean, it's a job of leadership and it's a job of authority. To ask a 12-year-old kid to be the authority figure over a coach who's probably in his 30s or 40s, and parents and players it's a pretty awesome responsibility. I don't think I was prepared to do the job back then, but luckily I made it. And I still remember both me and my stepbrother showed up on the same day. We were the same age. We weren't, like I said, equipped to do the job. They started yelling at us from, about the second inning on. I stuck up for myself and my brother never showed back up. So it's just kind of one of them sink or swim kind of professions sometimes.
Yeah,
So.
it is. Same thing for me. My brother and I were officiating basketball, and I was around that same age, and he took me one time, and that was it for me. And he still does it. He still officiates college and high school basketball games, and now he still does it. Have you done any other sports?
I was a football player. I was a barely a good baseball player. I was a good football player though. So I did do football. The more and more that I got into, kind of leadership and the camps and teaching and things like that. Obviously, we do a lot of that in the fall. So that kind of took me away from football. But I did officiate football. I thought it was the greatest experience I ever had.
Is that
So.
is that still the process now for working your way up to Division One? Is doing the camps on the baseball side, and for anybody that's interested in getting into it, kind of talk about that process too, working your way up to Division One.
Yeah. So to move up in any level of officiating, you've got to be the best person at the level you're at, right? So we usually do a lot of camps in the fall to identify people who are people that deserve an opportunity to move up inside of college baseball, and that's all levels, right? JUCO through D3, D2, and AIA D1. I mean, we vet the umpires out pretty hard, and it's a good system. And I can't speak to the system in the past. I know when I came up through college baseball, that was the route, and that foundation was already laid. So know that the people that end up on college fields, they get vetted out pretty hard, and that's through that camp process. And the camps have really kind of morphed. And I love the direction we're heading now, because it used to be, hey, let's just go out there, we'll let you work some games and we'll watch you work. But what happens if the pitcher is so much better than the batters? Well, then the ball never gets put in play. So it's kind of hard to really tell if an umpire can really work, or kind of the strengths of an umpire, if nothing ever happens in the games. But what we've done now is we've taken the emergence of video, and we've taken things that happen, and we have a real wide array of videos that show situations and things like that. And we really talk about the process and the thought behind it, and procedure. How do you navigate procedure, but also still maintain that human, element of officiating? And how do you, walk that fine line of being able to keep control while being, having to be the authority figure or the leader, and what that looks like. So we've really dug into not just umpires working on the field, but also, kind of process, procedure, and things like that to produce the best product we can possibly produce.
Did you work pro ball at all?
I did, yes.
For how
Yes, I
long?
was a minor league guy till 2000. So I was in long enough to really kind of be trained very well, but wasn't in long enough to where, I had to start making life decisions, meaning like, hey, do I still spend 7 or 8 months on the road and leave my family in chase of this dream to make it to the major leagues? To me, the reason I got out of professional baseball, and it's I believe in fate and things happening for a reason. I got offered a teaching job. And I always joke that I've held two of the jobs I always wanted to hold. I always wanted to umpire at a high level, and I got to do that, but I always wanted to be an educator. So I got offered it was about a week to go to spring training. I was going to go to Fitch with the Cubs, minor league spring training. And the AD from the high school that I was working at, doing long-term assignments, substitute teaching, offered me a job. And he goes, I know you're not going to take it, but I'm got to do my job. And I went home and thought about it and just thought, man, do I really want to pursue 7 or 8 months on the road for the next 10 years, in an attempt to make it to the major leagues, or do I want my path in life to be different? I wanted to be an educator. So I ended up leaving professional baseball to teach and coach at the high school level. So
is that your fail forward moment? I always ask about fail forward moments. Is that your fail forward moment? Maybe something you thought was going to sidetrack you, but looking back now was one of your best decisions?
No, I don't think that. And I'm my father was very good about making decisions because it's the right thing and not because you're emotional or because you're upset about something. The time that I was in the minor leagues was kind of a turbulent one when you consider the fact that we didn't have a union at the time. They were trying to implement a minor league union. In my last season, I mean, we didn't know whether we were going to go on strike, whether, it was a day-to-day thing. And we battled that all season for those guys to eventually get a union in place and things like that. So when I looked at it, not only was it my personal feelings, but it was kind of the state of the industry too, and kind of where things were heading and things like that. It was just a better fit for me to be an educator. And I always wanted to do that. And there was no guarantee that I was going to get that opportunity again. Now, the teaching jobs come and go, and I get that. But I had the opportunity to go back and teach at the same high school that I went to. And that was important to me. So, I was a figure in our community, and it gave me a chance to give back to the community that gave to me. And that to me at the time was more important than the officiating side.
And I give you a compliment because when I got into it, and you would always meet an umpire, and the first thing out of their mouth was be like, well, I just got out of pro ball. Their attitude towards the coaches was going to be a little bit different, and your attitude was great. I always had a lot of respect for you as an umpire, and I enjoyed our interactions, but you didn't come across as a guy who had just gotten out of pro ball because you could still talk to you. And that's not the case. And is that the biggest difference between pro ball and college umpiring? Is the communication piece?
I would say, Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No. Because I think it's better now because we have more guys that have done both. It just seemed like it got better. But when I was a young assistant and you'd run across some of those guys that had just got out of pro ball, they wanted nothing to do with you. They didn't want to talk to you during the game. They just don't want to communicate with you. And it just felt like you did a great job of communicating with coaches.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. But I always tell guys this, that teaching job was the best thing I ever did because not only did I teach, I coached football and baseball. So I was the head coach at a high school for 5 years. And there was never a time that I was on the field that I wasn't also the best umpire on the field, even though I was coaching. But I had respect for that position and was kind of making my way through your guys' world. And kind of seeing the world from both sides of that, right? And the best thing I ever did was do that before I got back into umpiring. Know this, that it's very hard to do both jobs. And I think a firm understanding of both sides is a really good thing for anybody who's involved. You had officiated basketball before you were a head coach of a university. So you saw both sides as well. When I talk about the professional ranks, when I got in, it was a 6-week course to get through umpire school. 2.5 weeks of that we spent on rules and positioning. So anybody that can do math would go, okay, well, what did you guys do the rest of the time? And they literally taught us to be combative. And they taught us that the coaches hated us, we hated the coaches. And that was kind of the mentality, right, wrong, or indifferent. That was the mentality back then. So anybody who came out of pro ball back then came in with that mindset. If I would have left pro ball and went straight into college baseball, I probably would have been the same way. We would be having a different conversation. But the fact that I spent time on the other side kind of let me see it through a different lens. But if you look at now, like back in the 80s and 90s in Major League Baseball, if they even looked at an umpire wrong, it turned bad, right? But what ended up happening is in Major League Baseball, they broke that union and they had that walkout and work stoppage and all that. And Major League Baseball flooded the system with guys at the lower end that would do it the way that they wanted to go forward. And they broke that combativeness and things like that at the major league level. Well, anything in baseball starts at the pro level, goes to the college level, and starts to kind of work its way down. You see the same thing in college baseball now, especially with the minor league umpires that come out. They don't come out with that huge chip or things like that because they're not doing that at the highest, the professional highest level. So they bring that down in that mentality to the college game. I would tell you the college game's in a really good spot as far as, the emergence of replay and things like that. It allows people you just don't see the arguments you used to see. I'm not saying they don't exist, but they don't exist every weekend, every game, every inning, to where it used to be like that. So I feel like, the pro guys that come in now come in with a different mindset, and it probably plays into that. But back when you were seeing those guys come in, they were coming in with the mentality that was ingrained in them from umpire school on. So.
And I was going to ask you, do you feel like that's the biggest difference now is the implementation of replay at the pro and the college level to alleviate a lot of those arguments?
Yeah, and it's it puts a procedure in there to allow the correction of errors or the play that a coach maybe goes, there's no way that person got that right. And then they go to replay and they go, oh man, they did. It's alleviated the arguments.
And maybe it gives pause too. Like that's where I felt like it was maybe a little different is because it allows cooler heads to prevail because you have a little bit of that buffer of the umpires go away, the coach gets to calm down a little bit. I think that's helped too because you have a little bit of that time buffer where some cooler heads are going to prevail then.
Sure. No, absolutely. I think you're spot on.
I think it's better now. I mean, overall, I think the relationship is better now. Are there ways to improve it? Are there things that we need to continue to improve upon that?
No, I'm sure there is. I mean, anybody in any walk of life, you can always get better, and you get 24 hours in a day to get it right. And I feel like, every day that people strive to get better as an umpire or a coach or a husband or a father or whatever that looks like. I feel like we're in a good spot. Umpiring's at all-time high right now. It really is. And you see some really, really good umpires, and it's very hard to reach the highest levels of college baseball. It's even harder to stay there. And what you have seen is the continuous education in the camps and guys really kind of digging in and making sure that they know everything about their job. That's gotten a lot harder as well. I mean, you got to understand in just replay alone. I mean, the replay manual is 20 plus pages. That's on top of the rule book, on top of the, officials manual and things like that. So it's a lot harder to umpire now than it used to be as well.
You came to speak at the convention to our youth and travel coaches. What do youth parents and coaches need to hear right now?
It's a game. It's a game. And it's, when you look at the youth industry, it's a $1 billion industry. I mean, it's huge. And these parents are paying for lessons and then their kids on a club team and they're doing all these things to provide for their young adult or young athlete to try to get them as good as they could possibly be in the attempt to move up and to go into college and maybe the professional ranks and things like that. I think if the parents can really look at it as a numbers game, because this isn't my opinion, this is stats. Okay. There's probably 1,500 players a year that play in the major leagues, 1,500. There are 330 million plus Americans. Okay. So statistically, you have a better chance of being struck by lightning than your kid making it to the major leagues by stats. This isn't my opinion. This is stats. Then all of a sudden you start factoring in the people around the world. It's hard. It's very hard. Those people are the very best at what they do when they make it to the major leagues. Even the worst major league player has a shrine to him somewhere because he was the best player where he was at. So I think when the parents get caught up in, hey, I need to get my kid to college. I need to get him to professional baseball, things like that. It's a pipe dream. It really is. I'm not saying people don't make it, but that shouldn't be the reason that people are in. Youth sports and sports in general are designed to make somebody a better human being, to learn how to deal with adversity so they can go out in society and be a productive member of society. It's not to make it to the major leagues. It's not. And I have 4 children, and they all play softball or baseball. I have 3 daughters, 1 son. My oldest daughter will be a college player next year, and she's a good player. But it's not about her making it to the major leagues of softball or things like that. It's about teaching her how to deal with adversity in life, allowing her an avenue to get a college education to set her up for life. And the avenue we're using is softball. But she still needs to be able to do that, even if she wasn't a softball player. My middle daughter might play college softball. She might not. But what it's done for my middle daughter is it's taken her out of her comfort level. It's taught her how to be a teammate. It's taught her how to be responsible and to do things in life. It's not about going 4 for 4 on a day. It's about the process, and it's about what she learns in that process. And it's about getting her to life to be a productive human being. I think parents and coaches get so caught up in, the lessons and the games and all these other things that I think that they forget that, look, you get your kid from, 5 or 6 years old to 18. And this is a special time to spend with your family and to go to the ballpark and to spend time. And these are memories you'll never get back. And I think the parents are so caught up in, oh, what's next? My kid needs to be the best, that they forget about the experience and the travel along the way. You know this as well as I do. Even the best player on the teams that you had wasn't the best player in the nation, but he wasn't the worst player either. It's always somewhere in between. So,
and by the way, if an umpire gets a call right or not, it's not going to affect whether your kid gets a chance to go to the next level or not. And I sent this out the other day. I said this was PSA to all youth coaches, parents, and players. You're going to be the reason whether the game thrives or doesn't, because we are running into an epidemic of umpire shortage at the youth levels. And a byproduct of that is the growth of the game. There are way more teams playing now, which means there's way more games now. We are having a hard time finding youth umpires because of the interactions of parents, coaches, and players. And we need to get back to we're all in this together.
Absolutely.
They're part of this process too. Whether the game thrives at the youth levels, if they handle it right and handle officials right, people are going to want to keep doing it. But if they don't, same thing. Your brother got out of it. I got out of it because of fan interactions. People need to understand that now. When you step into the ballpark to watch a youth game, you are positively or negatively impacting the game going forward 5-10 years from now if you don't handle it right.
Absolutely. And what are you teaching your young athlete? That when things don't go their way, that it's somebody else's fault? That's what you're teaching them. And I try to, when I talk to groups, I always discuss this. I can think of, and let's just talk about adults first, and then we'll go backwards. I can think of 5 professions in the United States where every day you leave your house, you run the risk of being assaulted, either verbally or physically. Police officer, teacher, a fire department, security / bouncer or something of that nature, sports official. 5. Out of all the jobs in the United States, 5. So if you had an avenue to go make money where you don't run the risk of being assaulted, that appeals to you more than it does going into being a sports official. Name one job that a child can take, and a child, I say 15 to probably 19, to where they run the risk of being assaulted when they go to work. Seriously. When I was 12 years old, umpiring baseball, I would have grown men go, hey, I'll meet you in the parking lot. And I'm thinking, well, my dad's here to pick me up. Like, I already got a ride. Like, why would we go meet in the parking lot? Like, grown men, like, trying to fight kids. I still see it on the weekends when I go and UIC at the youth league level in the summer. I still see grown men or adults or fans or even moms literally going after 15, 16-year-old kids. Like, when is that? It's got to stop, because nobody wants to do this job if you run the risk of being assaulted. I would tell you it's better now than it used to be. When I was coming up, and you probably saw the same thing in basketball, when I was coming up, it was every game. It was 4 or 5 people from each side, and it was all the time. But it's not acceptable. It's not acceptable to act like that. And it's not acceptable to treat young people like that. We had a guy in the Kansas City area write a letter, and I think I forwarded the letter to you.
Yeah, I was going to bring it up. I'm going to get it out. We're going to probably get it in Inside Pitch Magazine. Ryan Revelette's going to reach out. Adam Revelette's going to reach out to you about getting a Word document so we can get it in Inside Pitch and maybe get it out in the press box, and then hopefully we can disseminate that to more avenues because it's phenomenal.
Yeah, and the guy's message was this: like, I've had 3 kids try this already that were my children, and they all walked away for the same reason. They were tired of the abuse. And he goes, I got a 15-year-old son that wants to do it now. And his whole message in the letter was, how do I tell my wife and how do I tell my son that it's any different than it was when the others tried? He wrote something in there that really kind of hit me hard. He goes, how on earth can an adult try to treat my 15-year-old as a peer? And how can you expect him to stand up to you like an adult because he's not an adult? But yet you challenge him like an adult and you push and things like that. It's
a golden rule issue.
Yeah,
that's what we have to get back to as society. I say it all the time. We're dealing with a lot as society right now. We are. You have trans issues. There's LGBTQ issues. There's there are all kinds of issues, and the bottom line boils down to treat someone how you would want to be treated. And as a parent or a fan at a game, and you have a teenage kid officiating, just treat it like your kid is out there officiating.
Sure.
Just treat it like that.
And he even wrote that in the letter.
Just treat it like that.
How would you feel if I came out and berated your young player for making mistakes?
Exactly.
Everybody's going to make mistakes. Here's the thing that really kind of turned it for me. And I would tell you that it's a lot easier to set expectations before everybody gets emotional than to try to wrangle it in once everybody's already kind of getting after it, right? So the year that COVID shut down college baseball, I spent the entire spring, summer, and fall in the youth league world. I was there every day. And I expected to see this huge, I expected the worst, right? Oh, these people are going to be unruly, things like that. But what I found was something different. And listen to this. So I always wanted to go to the plate meeting of every youth league event. If I was a UIC, I wanted to go to every semifinal and final plate meeting. And the message was always the same. I'd go to the plate meeting with the umpires. I would allow them to do their thing. And before the coaches would leave, I said, hey, hang on. I go, look, you made it to a semifinal. This is very hard to do. You got to play well. You got to stay healthy. Things have got to break your way. I know it's hard to get to this point. You are emotionally invested in this game. And during this game, there's going to be some highs and lows. You need to coach your kids. Don't yell at the other team. Don't yell at the other players. Don't engage the other team's fans. Coach your kids. Spend your energy coaching your kids to try to win this game. I go, can you do that? Yes. Okay. If you don't, I get called to the field, and then I'm going to come down and ask you to stop. But then the trick is you're going to stop. Whether you want to or not, you're going to stop, because once we get to that point, it's about the kids, not about this argument. And at the youth league level, when they start arguing, they're on a time limit, and the clock's sitting there doing this. And the kids are going, hey, can we just get this game on? Like, I just want to play. But the adults getting involved, and it kind of gets muddied down. So we would talk to both coaches, and they'd agree that, okay, I'm going to coach my kids. That's the expectation. I'm not going to say anything to the umpire. If we have a rules question, I'll come out and address it in a professional manner. But that's how we're going to do business. And they agreed to it. And then I would take it a step further. I would go to the first base side. I'd go to the stands, and I'd say, hey, this is great. Your kids made it to a semifinal or a final. Are you guys ready to go? Yeah, no, we're excited. I said, look, you're going to have some highs and lows. This is going to be emotional. Do the right thing. Cheer your athlete on. Don't yell at the coaches. Don't yell at the umpire. Don't yell at the other stands. Can you do that for me? And they all go, yep. And then I'd go to the other side. Can you do that for me? Yep. And we didn't have one issue the entire year. Not one. Not one. I'm not saying the umpires were perfect. I'm not saying the game was perfect, but we didn't have one issue because the expectation was set before we started the game. I had one mom, when I did that, as I turned to walk away, she goes, well, that's no fun. And I turned back around and I said, and neither is you being escorted out in front of your kid. Like, you don't want that. And we don't want that for you. But that's the expectation, because if you cannot stay inside of the expectations that we set for you, we're going to have the police come escort you out. And you don't want that. And we don't want that for you. And we didn't have one issue. I would tell you this, and anybody that runs events, I would want them to listen to this. I grew up in a police household. Okay. My father was a lifetime police officer. And I think the world of what his career was and what he did for society and our neighborhood and things like that. But he always was fair, right? And he was a deterrent. Anytime somebody would see somebody with a gun and a badge and things like that, they would go, okay, they wouldn't act a certain way that maybe they would act that way if somebody wasn't there. So think about this. What at the youth league events, there was a police officer at every event? I mean, they need part-time jobs too. So what if there was? That's a deterrent. And you don't see people act in certain ways when that deterrent's there. So I think in the youth league and the high school and things like that, I really think that a licensed security guard or a police officer at each event would probably deter a lot of that. That's my personal opinion. That isn't me speaking for anybody else, but I feel like it would be a deterrent. So,
what are some of the better things you're seeing out there in communities to get more engagement and involvement with umpires at the younger levels and getting kids to want to do it?
You're seeing a lot of organizations take a zero tolerance and kind of setting the expectation ahead of time. And if some of the people that really act a certain way, if they could see themselves act like that, I think they would
get them on camera and be like, hey,
yeah.
here's what it looks like. I know you don't think it looks bad, but here's actually what you look like. Because that's part of bringing awareness to it. Just like having a code of conduct before games, announce it, whatever. That's bringing awareness to behaviors that maybe people don't realize how bad it actually looks.
Setting expectations.
Yes.
It's setting expectations beforehand. And I go around to a lot of the clubs in Kansas City, in some of the colleges, and I speak before the season starts. I always talk about the rule, any rule they want to talk about. I bring video examples. I talk about, hey, your kid's playing youth league baseball, but what's that look at the high school level and what's that look at the college level? Because at youth league baseball, it's about a celebration of success, not about a minimizing of failure, right? So Joey gets a six hopper up the middle that a better infielder at a higher level would have made a play on. It goes up the middle and they're like, oh yeah, Joey got a hit, greatest ever. But then when they move into high school and college and you were in this world, all of a sudden you're exploiting their weaknesses and you're scouting them and things like that. So it gets harder and harder to go as you go up. So when you get to that world, and that it's that transition between, okay, with the youth league level, Joey was the best. Well, now the high school coach doesn't like him because he never plays. No, that's not the case. Like literally a high school coach or a college coach doesn't hate your kid enough that he's not going to play him if he's the best player. So it's that transition and speaking to those people about, hey, look, that transition to youth to high school to college looks like this. And the best thing that ever happened this winter when I was doing these talks, I did 2 talks where there were parents and even moms in the talks, and I'd never had that before. And so I started talking to the parents and I said, hey, do you guys want to know why this is so hard for you? And all of a sudden, the coaches are kind of laughing and the moms are like, what are you talking about? And I go, think about this. I see my wife do everything for my kids at home. Like literally they're clueless. Like without her, like our house would not survive because our kids are just that. They're not there yet, right? They're not adults. They haven't figured it out. So what happens is these parents who pay for these lessons and drive them and they're emotionally invested, they drop their kid off.
And financially invested. They're both. It's emotional and financial.
Yes. They drop their kid off at sports and their kid walks in between those white lines and now they have no control.
Yes.
And it literally drives them nuts.
It drives my wife nuts.
Yeah, because they're like anxious and they're like, and you see them pacing. And I always say this, coach, it's that dad that's over and he's doing this on the side and he can't sit still. So I told those parents, I said, okay, when my daughter first started playing, I asked her 2 questions. I said, number one, when people say things from the stands or they try to coach their kid from the stands, can you hear it? And my daughter goes, not really. I can't really hear it. And I don't think they can either. And I said, okay, if you could hear it, would it help? And she goes, no, it wouldn't help. And I go, okay, so if you know that going in and it's not helping the athlete, then why you do it? You do it because of you, not because of them.
Yes.
Because
I've
already told you they don't want it. So you do it for you. it's the ones, and baseball's an odd sport, right? And softball's the same way. I see both worlds because I go watch both. It's the one sport where people talk just to talk and they don't say anything, but they just can't stop.
Yeah.
So the year that COVID shut us down, we were watching a youth league tournament, and I'm watching this dad, and he's just wearing out the concrete back and forth, and he just can't sit still. And I'm watching him all day, and they make a run. And I'm watching him, and he's just going and going. And I'm just sitting there going, he can't keep this up all day. Like, he's going to crash eventually. Like, it's just too much. So as the day continues to go, I'm looking and I go, wait, I know that guy. And I'm looking at him and I go, oh my God, he's the pitching coach for a D2 college in our area. During a college game, I've never seen the guy even have a pulse. Like, he's literally asleep in the dugout. He didn't say anything. But yet you put him in the youth league world and he can't sit still. So I go up and talk to him. I go, hey, what are you doing? And he goes, oh, man, what are you doing here? And we talk, because obviously their season got shut down as well. And I go, you got a kid playing? And he goes, yeah. And he goes, yeah, he's playing right field. And I go, I've been watching you all day, right? And he started laughing. He goes, what? And I go, what is wrong? I go, you can't sit still. Like, are you okay? He goes, it's sick, isn't it? He goes, literally, I can coach college athletes and have no issues. He goes, but my kid's out there and I can't sit still. This is a guy who is a professional coach. Literally, his job is a coach. And he can't even get it right, or didn't realize he wasn't getting it right. But like, think about that, man. It's.
I went down the line in my lawn chair. I'm sure the parents of the teams that my kids played on were like, "What's wrong with him? He's a Division I coach, and he's just because it was just like, I'm gonna get away from here and go hang out and watch and just try to be out of the way as much as I could, and part of try to be an example to parents too, as best I could, is like, okay, like, I get it. Let's enjoy this, but the wins and losses at this level don't mean anything. And I was going to ask you, for a youth coach, when is an appropriate time to ask? Like, say not that there's an issue or there's a question on a call. Is it in between innings? When are the best times? And we'll talk as we go, like, appropriate. But at the youth level, as a youth coach, when is an appropriate time to talk to the umpire? And I'm not talking balls and strikes. I'm talking about maybe a call it first or whatever. Balls and strikes, let's throw that out the window because, like, again, the guy's doing the best he can back there. And hopefully youth coaches understand that.
Sure.
And that's part of putting yourself in that person's shoes. Like, if you have never gone behind the dish and called balls and strikes, it's not an easy thing to do. So
no, it is not.
Let's take balls and strikes out of it. But say there's a judgment call or something, or you just want to have a conversation with the umpire. What's the appropriate thing to do as a youth coach?
Okay, so I think in essence, what is your job as a coach? Your job is to coach young players. Your job isn't to coach the umpires. Okay, but that's a byproduct of what happens, right? So I would tell the coach, and this would drive me nuts when my daughters play, because every game that they have that's not high school, so every youth league game or club league game or whatever is on a time limit. So it drives me nuts when our coaches would go out there and argue a call that is judgment that I absolutely know they're not going to change. And they would waste 4 or 5 minutes a game doing that. And then my daughter would be on deck and the time limit would go off. And I'm upset because I'm paying money for them to be there. And I'm like, if you would spend 5 minutes arguing over something that shouldn't be argued, number one, it's judgment, and they're not going to change anyway, you're cutting into the time that these kids can play. So I would tell the coach, I would do it in a time of warm up, walking to and from, in a time that doesn't cut into the time that the kids play. If it's something that you can settle after the game, settle it after the game. Go up to the UIC, go to the umpire. If you're going to do it in a respectful manner, I would go through the UIC and say, hey, look, we had this. It's all about us getting better. Can you just explain to this umpire this facet of it so that maybe later on we don't deal with it, or the next team or the next tournament or whatever, or the umpire can get better, because it's about the umpire being better as well. I love how the parents at a 12B tournament or something like that are so highly critical of the umpire. And then when they come up and say, hey, these umpires are terrible. And I'm like, you need to understand they're not professionals. Yeah. And they're at the youth league level with your youth league player who makes mistakes. This isn't a destination job for these umpires. It's a entry level position. It's not that they're out there trying to get things wrong. Maybe they don't know any better. Maybe it's a teaching moment. It could be a bunch of different things. I would handle it in a time that doesn't eat at the time that the kids are getting to play, because that's what you're doing, is you're there for them to play. If it's something that's really going to impact the game, meaning they apply a rule that's going to impact the game, and it literally, like, you can't wait till the last second, make them bring the UIC down. Have them stop the game, bring the UIC down, and say, hey, look, this is a direct conflict with the rules, boom, boom, boom. But if it's judgment and it's something that maybe the umpire could get better, and do it in a time that doesn't eat up the time that the kids are playing. Here's the thing. Just because you come and complain about an umpire's judgment doesn't mean it's automatically going to get better within 2 seconds. It is what it is at that point. But we can have conversations with those umpires and say, hey, look, maybe this is how you got to the point to where you didn't see something, or maybe, something we can fix down the road, but it's not going to be fixed that game. Even if you stop that game, it better be for a rule. Because the judgment isn't going to improve just because you stop the game. All you're doing is eating in the time the kids should be playing.
And by the way, half the time the coach or the parent doesn't know the rule anyway. So.
Doesn't know the rule either, yes.
Right. And that's part of that tweet that I sent out too, because parents, like, okay, it may not affect your kid right now because we have enough umpires, but 5-10 years down the road, you might be putting it on parents to umpire. Like that. Yep. That's where we're heading 5-10 years from now. If we don't get this cleaned up, it'll be the parents showing up and having to call balls and strikes from behind the mound and do the bases, and then who knows what you get into then when you have parents doing the officiating. But that's what we're looking at 5-10 years from now if we don't clean this up.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with volleyball. I mean, if you've ever been around club volleyball, who officiates the matches? The kids. The kids who are not playing, they have to put a representative out there to do the lines.
So
it's headed that direction.
Yes.
It really is.
And my brother started officiating volleyball because of it, because he makes a lot of money doing club volleyball because of the shortage. Yep. And did the math on he can work for a whole day and make a lot of money doing the club stuff. When is it appropriate time for coaches? Is it high school? Obviously college, we're going to have some issues. High school, is that appropriate now to where we can maybe come out and spend a little bit more time with the umpire if we need to on some calls?
I mean, it still comes down to judgment. The thing that the high school and the college coaches have is they have the power of the pen, which means they can identify weaknesses or things that maybe they didn't think were right. They can do that through evaluations and things like that. And I feel like the assigners do a really good job of taking that serious. The emergence of video, not just at the college level, but the high school level. So when I was speaking at the ABCA, I followed up a gentleman from the Federation in the first talk. And one thing that he said, he goes, within 5 years, he goes, and I'm being generous on the timeline. I think it's going to happen within a year or two. Yes. But within 5 years, every high school game will be streamed or televised or something to that effect. So the ability for these assigners to take feedback and go back and look at video, I mean, it's an important tool, because the thing is, the umpires and the officials, they want to get it right. Like, nobody wakes up and goes, hey, I want to do a bad job today. It could be a byproduct of maybe not knowing something, or a byproduct of maybe inexperience, or things that we can clean up. So then the next time, that mistake doesn't happen, or maybe the umpire was right. And maybe it's a teaching tool for the coach to where they go back and they go, oh, I didn't know that rule. Okay, well now, that dynamic changes a little bit. So I think it's about the education of both sides, about the rules, about procedure, and about the way to handle things and the way to kind of go about it. I would ask you this. If the parents and the adults weren't allowed to get involved in any of these discussions and the kids just played, how pure would that be? Like, seriously, think about a world to where the parents drop their kids off, the kids go play the games, the parents aren't involved, and they come back and pick them up. Like, you wouldn't have any of these issues. I've yet to see a youth league player come up to the UIC and go, hey, these umpires are terrible. It always comes from the coaches or parents. But yet you're asking somebody who has no expertise on what really good umpiring looks like, or really elite umpire looks like. You're asking somebody to give feedback on things that they're not knowledgeable about. It's just they're feeling that, like, hey, I feel like this isn't right by us, but they have nothing to go by to judge that. When we ask for feedback at the youth league level, we ask 4 questions. Number one, did the umpire want to be there? Yes or no? Because that's huge. That's huge. Do you feel like this person was engaged and they wanted to be there? Meaning the person wasn't on their cell phone, didn't hold up the half inning because they were texting.
They're hustling.
Yeah. Did they truly want to be there? Yes or no? Because they can tell us that. We can go back and I feel like they're knowledgeable about that. Number 2, did the umpire know the rules? Yes or no? And if not, what rule do you think that umpire didn't know? And then that way we can kind of get to the bottom of that. Number 3, could the umpire communicate well? Yes or no? That has nothing to do with the rules. It just says, hey, does this person know how to talk and to be able to receive feedback back and forth and have that dialogue so we can get the best effort out of everybody for these kids? And number 4, would you ever want this umpire again? Yes or no? So if you think about it, we treat it a lot like an HR department in business. So I used to manage CDL drivers, and anybody that's ever seen a truck on the road, there's always a sticker on the back that says 1-800, how are we doing? And it has a driver's number on there so you can report things that you feel like isn't up to what it should be. So if you were one of my drivers and I got a report on you and you came in, I'm going to say, Ryan, hey, somebody called into the hotline. They said you ran them off the road on I-70. And you're going to go, no, me? No, never. I would never do that. And I go, okay, we'll know that feedback came in. We're going to put it in your file. And if that wasn't you and this wasn't the case, we'll never have this conversation again. But this is the feedback we're getting. So what happens with that feedback is what happens 4 weeks later when 2 different people give the same feedback that had nothing to do with the first one. Now, all of a sudden, you're starting to kind of see patterns, right? And anything more than 2 is a pattern. So now all of a sudden we can go to that umpire and maybe it's knowledge of the rules, or maybe it's doesn't treat people well. Maybe you're not engaged. Maybe you have your cell phone out, whatever that looks like at the youth league level. And we can hold these umpires more accountable, but also reward umpires who are doing the right thing, because that feedback doesn't always come back negative. It comes back positive a lot of times as well. Think about this. It's like my father in his police work. You never see reports on TV that, hey, officer pulled somebody over. Everything was by the book. The person got their ticket and they left. You never see that. Yeah. You never see the millions and millions of cases to where somebody got something right. You only see the one that got something wrong, or that you feel got something wrong.
And that's the same thing too. Put yourself in. Anybody think that being a police officer is easy? Go try to do that for a while and see how it turns out for you. Hey, I was going to ask you from a college coach's perspective, because I did it for 22 years, and I tried to be fair to the umpires, but you would get into a game where you felt like the other coach was maybe influencing. And I think it's really hard to be an umpire because you may have one guy in your ear the whole time. I think from a behavior standpoint, sometimes it does influence. And as a college coach, you don't want your players to feel like you don't have their back on things. And I think obviously you're going to see more balls and strikes stuff at the college level. Is there an appropriate time on that? I mean, I tried to stay off as much as I could, but sometimes we would play. I knew coaches were going to be on the umpires the entire time, and maybe I'm wrong on that because I felt like we maybe got more calls down the road because I didn't get on guys as much. But just from a coaching perspective, is there a way to handle it better with umpires on that?
Well, I'm probably not going to speak to that more than I will speak to this. Even at the youth league level, it happens way too fast for somebody to side with one side or the other. Yeah. It really does. And I know people feel like, oh, well, this guy feels like everything goes right for this team, but not for this team. Believe me, this stuff happens so fast, even at the youth league level, that umpires do not have the ability to say, I'm going to side with one side or the other. They don't. I'm being God honest. At the professional level, it's impossible. Like, that ball moves way too fast. So I would just tell you this, when an umpire is out there on the field, they are not thinking about who's winning, who's not winning. And it's the same thing with basketball officials all the time. I see people that are like, well, there's 9 fouls on this side, but only 1 foul on that side. It's not on purpose. Like, it's the flow of the game. It's what's going on. And the umpires, it happens so fast. They don't have the ability to side with one side or the other. If everybody wanted to truly be honest, poll 1 million umpires and you would get the same answer. Like, I don't, and I'm going to tell you right now, it's when you are in the trenches and you are during the game and things like that, you are so hyper focused on just getting the next pitch, getting the next play, that you don't have the ability to say, is it for this team, for this team? Umpires don't do that.
Yeah.
They don't.
And that's why I brought it up, because people need to hear that. Especially somebody that hasn't done it, they don't realize everybody's trying their best. Like they are trying their best. With what your dad did that draw you to a life of service? I mean, seeing that in your house and what he did, and now, I mean, for me to be an umpire, that's a life of service. To do what you do for a living, it's a life of service. Did that draw you to doing that?
I think the similarities in the job definitely made me more equipped to do it. Just because I felt like I saw it growing up, and I saw, similar procedures and things like that, much the same way that you sat in the dugout with your dad for all those years, probably, made you more apt to do what you did. When you have a high respect for somebody and their service to their community and things like that, I think that, every kid, if it happens the right way, your biggest hero should be your dad, right? So, when you see kind of what they do, I mean, every kid kind of wants to be like their dad, and I think they fight it for a little bit when they're growing up. So, pretty cool story. Todd Tishner is a guy I got in the minor leagues with, who's a major league umpire. And Todd and I are still really, really good friends. And he still lives in Kansas, lives in Holcomb, Kansas. So he's got a family, right? And his oldest son, I get a call from him last year, and he goes, "Hey, I want my oldest son to come to your umpire clinic." And I go, "Okay, let me get this straight. So I'm a guy who's a major league umpire. You want to send your son to somebody else to get training?" And he goes, "Look, man, I'm his dad." He goes, much like you see major league dads probably show up at their youth league games for their kids, and they're the same as you. They just get out of the way. Yeah. So the trick's kind of on the parents. Like, if the guys at the highest level are like, "Hey, the coach, this is the coach. It's his gig. This is my kid's game. I'll be out here." So when they do that, so why wouldn't it be good enough for the parents that aren't subject matter experts? But what would happen is you have a guy who's a major league umpire who's completely capable of training his child, sends him off to somebody else. So he goes, "Look, I just want to be dad. I don't want him to have that kind of pressure in his life. This is for him. This isn't for me." I completely respect that. So his son shows up at the event, does a great job, really good umpire. And he wants to be a professional umpire. He wants to follow in his dad's footsteps. So we were sitting over, and I was talking to him, and I go, "Why do you want to do this?" And he goes, "I didn't for the longest time." He goes, "I hated everything about it." He goes, "I wanted nothing to do with it. I didn't want to be like my dad." He goes, I wanted a different path in life." He goes, "But I want to be like my dad." He goes, "Now I do." And he goes, I really want to, he goes, I've seen the sacrifices he makes. I see the job he does. I see how cool it is. He goes, "I want to be just like my dad." So it's kind of neat to see, kind of the next wave or the next generation of umpires kind of take this serious and take all the tools that they have at their fingertips and kind of take a step forward. But he just wanted to be like his dad. He really did. But if you think about this, what if that experience is the other way? And what if you're my kids and all four of them, none of them want anything to do with umpiring? Now, my oldest will do volleyball, but she doesn't want to do softball. So I asked her, I go, "I think you'd be a really good umpire. Like, why don't you want to do this?" And she goes, "I watched you growing up. Like, I don't want to deal with that." Literally, that came out of her mouth. Yeah. She goes, "We'd go with you on the weekends, and I'd listen to these fans and these people berate you and do things to you." And she goes, I don't want that life. So it can go the opposite direction as well. So
how is the college season going?
It's going well. I wish the weather was a little better at times, but it could be worse at times too. I mean, it's a season to where, not only do you have to be prepared and to get yourself ready to go, but then you have to continue to adjust during the season to new things that you'll see, new protocols. I mean, just things that happen throughout the season. You've seen, baseball as an extended period of time. The beauty of our game is you continue to see things you've never seen before. And if you don't know the rules and you don't have a solid foundation under you, then it's really hard to kind of continue to be, at a high level for an extended period of time. That's why it's really hard to umpire at the professional level, because at college baseball, you start on Friday, you leave on Sunday. The professional guys go to another town. and they do it again and again and again and again. So I love college baseball. I love, what it does for young adults. I love what it does to prepare kids. And at the end of the day, we're out there, to make it the best product we can possibly be. I think a lot of people don't see the preparation that goes into it. So I start working out. Usually I start around Thanksgiving to prep for February. Think about how long that is out just to physically be prepared to do the job. Because if you're not physically able to do it, I mean, it's hard to be out there for an extended period of time. That's why I got so much respect for guys like Perry Costello and guys who are my, kind of my mentors, the Chris Koskis of the world, the guys like that, the Mark Winters of the world, guys who have been at it for an extended period of time, who are older than me, that still perform at a really high level. I respect that. Because the more and more in the years that go by, it just gets harder and harder to physically meet the demands of the job. So
yeah, I mean, it's a long time. You're on your feet for a long time. You're back there. If you got the plate, you are back there. You're squatting every pitch, and games don't always go fast. I mean, how are you routine wise or working out wise? How are you handling it physically? What are your hacks?
Every day. Yeah, every day. So my weight really fluctuates, and I'm a bigger guy. In the off season, I do nothing. I don't work out at all. I don't touch a weight. I don't run. I want to spend that time, trying to be there for my kids and my wife, and, spending an hour or 2 hours at the gym during that time just isn't something I want to do. And plus we only have so much tread on our tires, year in and year out. So usually around Thanksgiving, I start working out, and I go from 250 to 255 to 230 for the season. That's a lot of weight. And I have to be real strict. I have to get up at 5:30 every morning and cardio. I have to work out in the morning. I'm very strict about what I eat. I only eat so many calories, because newsflash to Americans that think that a pill will help you lose weight, it's been the same equation since the beginning of time. Burn more calories than you take in. That's it.
And nutrition is a big one. I mean, when you talk about what, because again, we have a lot of different people that listen to this. So nutrition wise, I mean, what are you watching? What are you putting in? Protein wise, carbs. What's a normal meal for you look like, or for meal frequencies, or just kind of lay out your day from a nutrition standpoint?
So I do not eat before I work out at 5:30 in the morning.
I don't either.
And then after I work out, usually around 8:30 when I take my son to school, I will do fruit, but I'll do it as a shake.
That's mine also.
Banana, oranges, I'll go peanut butter, I go yogurt, and I mix it into a shake. And then I eat very little at lunch, but I do eat, but it's all meat. So it'll be like maybe a piece of chicken or something like that, but I don't do anything else. And then I do not eat after 6:00 at night. I take no calories in after 6. So if you think about it, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and it's basically intermittent.
It is. It's intermittent fasting. It is.
Intermittent fasting. There you go.
Mine's 8 p.m., but I always like that. What do you do then post game? You're going to have a night game that you have to umpire. Do you get any sort of nutrition in, or you just ride it out to the next day?
Yeah, no. So that's getting ready for the season. Once the season starts, we burn so many calories that really it's about patterns at that point. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that pattern's probably not desirable for maintaining a certain weight or things like that. But Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday has to be that. I have to go back to that pattern to make sure that I can go to the weekend and not, get egregiously out of that pattern, because your body is going to react to patterns. Somebody that drinks every day, obviously your body's going to react to that, and your body's going to look a certain way. If you talk to a lot of people that lose weight and, maybe they have that midlife crisis and they shave 30 pounds, I guarantee a lot of them are like, yeah, I quit alcohol.
Yes.
And you're like, man, amazing.
Sugar of some sort. I mean, people don't realize alcohol is a sugar just like any other sugar. So, and people don't realize that alcohol crushes your system with sugar. Like, you may not eat a lot of candy, but if you're drinking a lot, it's going to affect your body the exact same. Plus, the hard thing with alcohol is you can't build any sort of muscle for 36 hours after you drink.
It's hard.
It's hard.
It's hard for sure.
You said it takes you a little bit. Do you take supplements or anything to help with travel, sleeping?
Well, I do take pre-workout, and I'm not saying that that's good for everybody or not good. It's
I
just
do
what I
too.
do.
I'm a
Yeah, so I
pre-workout
take
fanatic.
pre-workout before I work out. I'm stronger at almost 50 years old than I was at 20. And my body overall is stronger, and I'm still very, very strong. I don't know if I would be that strong without using that pre-workout, but I've never tried either. So I try to do that during the season just because it has caffeine and other things in it that kind of help jumpstart you. But then it has vitamins and supplements in it. But then after that, once the season's over, I get off everything, and I don't even mess with any of it.
With COVID, I mixed a vitamin D supplement in, so that was something I wasn't doing a lot of, except recruiting wise. I would take a vitamin D and a B supplement to stay on top of it. But then I've started to make magnesium and zinc in for sleeping.
Sure.
At
Yeah, and I
night.
take glucosamine, fish oil, and like a multivitamin.
Okay. Yeah, I'm always
Glucosamine.
fascinated by what people, because you're in great shape, and I love asking people that are in shape. You've always been in good shape because it doesn't just happen. Like nobody's
Oh, it takes work.
that
It
gifted
takes a lot of
genetically
work.
to just roll out of bed and it's gonna look or you're gonna feel the way that you want. Like you have to stay on top of it because if not, you're gonna be in tough shape. It's gonna be tough
Yeah,
shape.
and I see pictures of me in the off season sometimes to where I'm sideways or something, and I'm like, oh God, that's bad. but then it's about it's my dad. My dad was really good about saying this: you can have anything you want in life, but you can't have everything.
Yes.
You can say, hey, I want to be in great shape, and then if you won't do the steps necessary to be in shape, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And I feel like as Americans, we always look for that quick fix to where it's like, oh, well, I can just take these diet shakes and it will. No, it still takes dedication. It still takes a pattern to get your body used to what you want it to do.
You doing anything different umpiring now wise than when you first started? Well, what about your craft has changed over the years from an umpiring standpoint?
It's about feedback, right? And um, it's about if you're wrong, never being wrong the same way again. Meaning you have something happen to where you just don't handle it well, and it can be a situation, it can be a play, it could be anything. And it's dissecting that and leaning on your peers and leaning on your mentors and leaning on the feedback you get, and saying, okay, look, can this be better? The one thing that's very hard in the umpire world, and we see it a lot when we're trying to sculpt these younger umpires to go from one level to the next, is they struggle a lot of times because they're paid to be right. Just because you are right at one level doesn't mean it plays at the next level. Or just because you're right at one level that you're at doesn't mean it would play in the postseason or whatever that looks like. So being able as an umpire to take feedback and take the emotion out of it and go, okay, maybe there's a better way to do something, I feel like is the way to do it for any umpire. Sometimes you'll be given feedback that maybe it's not credible or maybe it doesn't fit you or things like that. But it's about vetting out all of that information and going, hey, can I be better at something? I might get a call from my assigner or a peer of mine or somebody who's a mentor, and they might go, hey, I like this, but what about this? And if I just go, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, then I never grow as a human, and I never grow as a professional, and I never grow to be what it could be or meet your maximum potential. I don't want to be the guy that 10 years later I'm still the same person or still the same umpire or still. There's always a better way to do something. And I feel like the people that always ask why, because when we train umpires, we don't tell them what to do. We tell them how to get there. And I always have guys that are like, well, you just tell me if it's right or wrong. And I'm like, no, because when you're on the field, you can't stop the game and call somebody and go, hey, am I right or wrong? Like you have to vet through this process and figure out how you fit, what your personality is, how you do things. And you need to be able to get to the point to where you're on the field and you can just react and not think. Because that's when the game slows down for umpires and players and coaches, when you don't have to think, where you put in so much preparation that you can just react.
Do you have to prepare differently for the postseason? I mean, tensions are going to be a little bit higher probably in the postseason. Do you have to prepare any differently for that?
I wouldn't say prepare. I think anybody that's worked in the postseason at any level knows that it's a very Very difficult thing to do.
It's palpable tension. It is palpable tension.
Yes, it requires a certain level of focus and dedication and belief and conviction. It takes a lot. And when you get to that level and you work in that postseason environment, there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. And then when you get a taste of it, you just want more of it because it's such an addicting focus. You know, there's something about being able to, you know, take the first pitch at 7, and then all of a sudden you take the last pitch at 10 or 10:30 or 9:30 or whatever it is. And then you go to walk off the field and you go, I literally felt like we were out there 10 minutes. Yeah. Because that's what that kind of focus does to you, is you have to be so.
You have to get in the moment, flow state.
And here's the thing that I respect most about the umpires that make it to the pinnacle of our profession. There's one common denominator out of all those umpires, and they're all different. And they're all different body types. They're all different conferences. The one thing those guys can really do is they have the ability to focus for long periods of time without missing a beat. They do. And I tell guys that all the time, their ability to focus, because when the game starts, what happens when you're 2 innings in and then all of a sudden you hit a 4-hour rain delay? Yes. Well, the umpires don't just go home and take a nap. You're in the locker room, same as the players. And the ability to come back out and work another 3 hours past that after you've had all this, or, you know, think about the big league guys. They switch time zones. They sleep in a hotel every night, and they still get things right at the highest level because of that one common denominator. They have the ability to focus for very long periods of time without missing a beat. And it's a hard thing to do, man.
How do you handle when you have the plate? Because how do you get to, you don't get to check out. You have to be on for both sides. You're playing the entire game, so do you have any tips for checking out maybe in between innings and then getting locked back in?
I don't feel like you can do that. I feel like you and what people don't see is there are a lot of things in between innings that the umpires have to do. I mean, there's a lot of
keep track of the pitcher's pitches.
Yep, we have times, we have on deck hitters, we have changes, we have all these different things. So once those guys are on the field, they're locked in the entire time. Think about the difference between good and great, right? The difference between bad and good is huge. The difference between good and great is like this. To make it to the College World Series, you have to be one of, I don't know, let's say there's 5,000 college umpires out there. You have to be one of like 8 of 5,000. Think about those odds. So it's not that, you know, and I always say this, a guy that never gets to work the College World Series doesn't mean he's a bad umpire. He's probably very, very good, and he's probably going to have a long career. But the difference between the guy who works the College World Series and the guy who doesn't might be this much. And it's no knock on the guy that never gets there.
Just like a coach that's never made it. There's a lot of great coaches out there that will never get to coach in the World Series.
It's that hard. Yes. It's that hard. But know that those umpires are out there. They're vetted very, very. I mean, it's hard for those guys. They get watched all season. They have to perform at the highest level, and they have to do it for a long period of time. Because you have one good year, they're not going to say, okay, we're going to put you in the College World Series. You have to have a great career, a very, very good year, and things have to break right for you. They really do. Those guys are the best at what they do. I don't think people understand how truly great those people are.
How'd you get connected with Perfect Game?
The guy, a guy that ran the stuff in Kansas City about 4 years ago or something. I was not linked to youth league baseball at all. I'd kind of moved on. I was doing my own thing. The most I would see is when I would go to my daughter and son's game. That's all I would see, my daughters and son. So I met this guy named Jeremy McDowell, who's a great human being. And he goes, hey, I want to eat lunch with you. And so he kind of got to me through a buddy of mine, and we all went and ate lunch. And so we're sitting there, and he started kind of complaining about the umpires and the lack of umpiring and just kind of everything out there, right? So I had my iPad, and I pulled up his website for his tournament company. And I go, okay. I said, you have this 2-page description for a tournament director. Why? And he goes, well, we want to make sure we get the right person. It's about the customer interaction and about the experience and things like that. And I go, okay. So I pull up the next deal. I go, you have a 2-page description for a gatekeeper. Like, why? Well, it's got to be the right experience and the culture and things like that. And I just looked at him and I go, hey, man, I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but you're an idiot. And he goes, what? You know, and he could have taken it and been offended. And there was another tournament guy there as well that ran another company. And I just told him, I said, you guys are missing the boat on this thing. And they go, what are you talking about? And I go, okay. I said, customer experience, right? He goes, yep. I said, who touches your customer 98% of the time? And they go, oh, no. I go, the umpire. But yet you outsource it. You don't really care about it. Like it's like a necessary evil. But you could put on the best tournament in the world as far as like the tournament director and the way they get into the gate, the way they get out, the way the T-shirts are settled and all that. I go, but still, if the umpires aren't performing at a high level, that's all they're going to remember. And all of a sudden, you just saw this ghost white look across his face. So about 2 days later, he calls me and he says, hey, I want to talk to you. And I said, okay, let me call my guys and we'll get back together. He goes, no, I want to talk to you, just you. And so I went and ate lunch with him. And he was like, man, like you kind of struck a nerve with me. And I go, well, I'm just being honest with you. I go, I don't work for you. I just met you. I got no reason to lie to you. I'm just being honest. And he goes, no, I respect that. And so we started talking and we talked about the umpire experience and things like that. And he goes, I'm going to hire you one day. And I go, yeah, whatever. So, you know, we kind of go our own way. And then sure as he said, he called me one day and was like, hey, I want to hire you. And I go, okay, well, I'm listening. So then I ended up going to work for him in his tournament company that he had built up in Kansas City. And then he entered a partnership with Perfect Game. So then Perfect Game absorbed his company and they have this partnership now. So then I moved from his company to Perfect Game, which I'm going to tell you right now, they are phenomenal people.
Yeah.
Phenomenal people. And when you talk about the experience and their why in this world and what they do, I'm very lucky to work for a company that truly cares about the industry, truly cares about the players that are playing, and tries to give back to the community. A lot of people don't realize that Perfect Game has a foundation.
Yep.
You know, PG cares.
The AFLAG game started because of that.
And they take the show into these communities and they give back to communities that couldn't do things if they didn't have that kind of support. You know, they go put on clinics and try to get kids involved that don't have the money to play in baseball and softball. It's expensive. And they give back and just to kind of see the way that these people go about it and their care and they want to really provide the world-class experience for the youth league level and the high school level. Just it was lockstep with what I want to do with the umpires. So it's been a good run. We have really good people. We got some work to do though, right? On every end on the umpire side. And there's a guy named Glenn Carnes out of Florida that's a phenomenal man. There's a guy named Andrew Tumlin that are in the umpire office that every day we're hashing out, how do we get this better? How do we get more umpires? When we get them, how do we retain them? How do we give back? How do we make sure that they operate at a world-class level at anywhere you want? Because if you think about this, the reason people love Chick-fil-A or McDonald's or Home Depot is because Home Depot in Phoenix looks like Home Depot in Kansas City that looks like Home Depot in Indiana. So the one thing you want as a coach is you don't want the guesswork. It's hard enough to coach your players without having to try to coach the umpires as well. You just want them to come, hit on all cylinders, give you the fairest chance possible to win the game with your athletes without any outside, exposure or influence. And let the cards lie where they may. You want to win or lose because you're either good enough or you're not. When the umpires aren't hitting on all cylinders, it's really hard to kind of navigate all that as a coach. So we want to make sure that we take our umpires and make sure umpire number 1 looks like umpire number 500, looks like umpire number 1,000, 5,000, things like that. And it's a very hard thing to do. But we got some good things in place and some phenomenal people that are behind the scenes that we're going to get it done.
Is that why you started the Umpire app?
Actually, I started it 3 years ago because I was tired of having the same conversation over and over and over and over.
Yeah, explain that for somebody listening in that wants to dive into where can they find the Umpire app?
Yeah, so you can go. We have a website, and it is an app. It's an app component to a web-based service. So you can go to www.ump-app.com, and you can go and you can sign up as a coach, as an umpire, or as a group, right? And what we wanted to do is we wanted to provide everybody the same information So they could go and say, okay, is this right? Is it wrong? Whatnot. And then have the umpires to have a tool to where they can go in and look at something and fix it in between games. Because what I don't want is to have somebody that have that preseason meeting that's like, okay, come check in for 2 hours. We're going to try to solve everybody's problem in 2 hours. Then we're going to cut you loose, and then you have no support after that. So when my daughters play softball, we usually have the same umpires all weekend. So imagine that they mess a rule up on Friday. And then I'm like, okay, they'll get it right the rest of the weekend or something. And then we come back Saturday and they do the same exact thing. And then we have them Sunday and they do the same exact thing. And I'm just going like, it's not that hard. Like, but here's the thing. The UIC can't just sit and watch one group of umpires. So I wanted to build it with the thought of if somebody has something in between or during a game, they can look it up in between games in a way that they would want to look it up, which is video-based learning, and give them the ability in a minute or 2 minutes to go, boom, ooh, I was wrong. Okay, well, I'll never be wrong again. Because how umpires learn is by failure. Same way with players, you learn by failure. So if we can take the failures of every umpire and take the rule book and put it in a virtual form and then put things in there like how to deal with conflict and how to do all these different things, then what we can do is we can get umpires at a faster rate and flood the market with umpires and give them a tool to allow them to do their job. Because there's only so many, there's only so many hours in the day for me or for you. So what we wanted to do, instead of bringing everybody, taking everybody and bringing them to the content, we wanted to take the content and send it outward. And the umpires at first, it was an adjustment for them. And they go, man, like, I don't want to do this. And I'm like, really, why? Well, because it costs money, number one, and like it takes my time. And I go, okay, that's fine. I said, what would we do traditionally? Oh, you would have us show up to 3 meetings and then we would have to, go do whatever. And I go, okay. So every time that key hits your ignition, that costs you money because gas is outrageous. So you're spending more money than you would spend just to invest in this to come to these meetings. And then you have to spend 4 hours. Wouldn't you want to just be able to look it up on your own and do it on your own pace in a way that you would want to do it? And then when you talk to them about that, they go, yeah, no, I'll take that. Yeah. It's about mindset and change though, right? The ability to give umpires videos and explain the rules inside the videos. It's the way we train college umpires. So if it's good enough for the college umpires, it's good enough for the youth league umpires. So we wanted to produce a system that allowed groups. We have a ton of Parks and Recs. We have a ton of groups on it. Perfect Game is on it. We wanted to give them the ability to standardize their umpires by showing everybody the same exact thing and the same exact cadence and have the same exact training, because that's how Home Depot did it. And that's how Google does it. And that's how all these people that train and standardize mass employees. That's why McDonald's operates the same in Charlotte that it does in LA, because they show everybody the same exact thing on the same cadence. And then there's no guesswork.
How'd you develop your style back there? I mean, I feel like every good umpire has their own style for balls, strikes, hesitation.
It's your personal body. It's how your body fits. It's how your personality, but it's also got to fit into the parameters that are given to you, right? So you have to operate under a certain set of standards and structure, but it allows you to kind of be yourself inside of that.
The hesitation call was always the tough one for me. That was always the hard one for me with guys that took too long before they said ball or strike. And I know they're trying to get it right, but it always felt like the guys that waited too long had more issues with balls and strikes than the guys that were maybe a little more expedient back then.
Well, sometimes when the guy hesitates on a ball or strike, something happened that changed the variables, right? Maybe the catcher did something off pattern, right? Because the catchers are very pattern people as well. So maybe the catcher did something that changed the pattern, and maybe the umpire had to look at it a little bit longer to process that pattern to go that route. I mean, it's always, the beauty of baseball is, and, the guys like your dad and the guys who have been around forever, they see the same pattern over and over and over and over for 30 plus years, right? So anytime that pattern varies, it alerts them right away, because they're so used to seeing it a certain way that all of a sudden something different happens and it goes. It's the same with baseball. And that's the beautiful thing with our game is when we're teaching guys like how to take plays at the plate, You could put a runner at second base and you could fungo 4,000 balls to the outfield, and it's still the same play, and it's going to happen 4,000 different ways when you do it. Man, think about that. I mean, think about how hard that is. So,
how have you had to adjust to the one knee stuff? I mean, I felt like it helped umpires see better down there, but how have you had to adjust?
When the catcher goes down there?
Does it matter?
Yeah,
I mean, does it matter? I wanted to ask
actually,
just because it gets so much play on the coaching side now, and everybody has their own ideas. But I wanted to ask from an umpire's perspective, does it even really matter traditional one knee down, Tony Pena style? I mean, there's a bunch of different things you're seeing back there. Does it really matter for you guys what the catcher's doing?
No, so just think about this. It's about consistent vision, right? Yeah. It's about putting yourself in the same spot every single time to be able to see every pitch the same way. Because if you can't do that, it's kind of like a science experiment where you keep changing the variables of the experiment and then you take the data for the end game, right? So I don't really think it matters much what the catcher does. I'd much rather have somebody do that than somebody be a big guy who works real far back as a catcher, which I get why they do it, because they don't want to get hit, because it's harder to see.
You're going to lose a lot more strikes that way, though.
Yeah,
so that's something for coaches. If the catcher reaches out, and you don't want to get too tight, but they need to be able to reach the batter's leg. That was always the thing I looked at more with our catchers than anything, is if they were getting too far back. You're going to lose a lot more strikes if they're too far away from the batter.
Well, and it's angles, right? Yeah. So any kid that's a over the top guy, he's standing on a mound, and let's say he's 6'5", and the ball's going straight down like that. A catcher that sits really far back allows the ball to travel a further distance. Yeah. The best catchers and the guys in professional baseball were great at this. They knew when to come up and cut the ball off. Yeah. But then think about this. What if it's a pitch that hasn't quite developed yet? They knew to back up and catch it back here to give it more time to travel. So it's about cutting it off or allowing it to move even more. The one thing that we've seen in baseball, I feel, in the past 5 years is people are throwing up in the zone on purpose now.
Yes.
To where it wasn't always a thing back then. Usually guys really tried to throw down in the zone with the ability to, hey, we just want ground balls, but they figured out that we can throw up in the zone and get people to fly out. So, as a catcher, I would tell coaches this: if you have a guy that's going to throw up in the zone on purpose, have the catcher come out. And when the umpire's taking warm-up pitches, the thing I want to know is, what's his out pitch? Are you guys going to do anything that's out of the ordinary that's going to surprise me? Meaning your guy is going to speed up his delivery with nobody on base with 2 strikes to try to change the timing of the hitter or something like that. Let them know. That way I don't have my head down and then I look up and the pitch is on its way. And then if I'm going to throw up in the zone for strikes, I'm going to tell the umpire that. Because then all of a sudden he's not going to think you got there by accident. He's going to think you're throwing up there on purpose. Those are things umpires need to know.
And is that biggest difference now for you maybe with players is can catchers still communicate well, or does it take a little bit to communicate with catchers now with the new generation of players? Or do catchers still do a good job?
I haven't really noticed a difference, but the catchers
can talk.
Yeah, but the catchers have a lot more on their plate now too. I mean, you see a lot of times these guys are wearing earplugs.
Yes.
Because they're listening to the coaches in the dugout. So a lot of times, they're so preoccupied with listening and making sure they get their signs off before the 20 seconds is up. There's not a lot of communication with the umpire. Usually that communication's before the game. Like I said, hey, heads up, this is this, this is this, this is this.
In between innings?
Not really.
Yeah.
Not really. They're just so preoccupied with getting everything done that a lot of times there's not time to talk, really. So,
what are some final thoughts, or if there's a question I should ask that I didn't?
Know this: that an umpire is somebody's father, somebody's husband, somebody's son, somebody's daughter,
somebody's wife. We've got female umpires now. Somebody's wife.
Yep, somebody's wife. Umpires don't. Nobody goes to an umpire's house and kidnaps them and throws them on the field and won't let them won't let them leave till the game's over. They choose to be there. If you want those people to continue to choose to be there, you have to treat them with respect. And I'm not saying you can't disagree, but to flat out berate a person because they feel like little Joey is being wronged or things like that, like you just can't do that anymore. There was an incident in Colorado about 3 or 4 years ago, and it was at a rec league field with a 15-year-old umpire, a rec league field. And it was a batting out of order. The umpire didn't quite know how to handle it. So when the leadership kind of gets stripped from the umpire because they can't lead, it goes to the coaches and parents. Well, then all of a sudden they try to lead from their side. Then this side starts to lead and it just goes, oh. So that's what happened at that field. And somebody pulled a cell phone out, and multiple cell phones actually. And the next day I turn on CNN and it's national news. A 7-year-old rec league game. Nobody's getting paid. Nobody's on scholarship. You're actually paying to be there. And the parents and coaches were fighting on the field. It was a full out brawl.
Yeah, I remember the video.
Yeah. So if you remember the 7-year-olds in there fighting as well, right? No, you don't remember that because the kids are like, seriously, like we're just trying to play baseball. And now you guys are out here fighting. 3 people lost their full-time jobs. 3 people got fired from their full-time jobs because it made national news. And all of a sudden they're like, hey, is that Joe from accounting out there? And they lost their full-time jobs over a 7-year-old rec league baseball game. I guarantee not one person got in the car that day and went, hey, we're going to get in this brawl today. But baseball has such an intimate relationship with the people that play it. And it's so ingrained in our fabric as Americans. It's America's game, right? That they just get so emotionally like just worked up that they just can't control themselves. So I would tell any player or coach, or excuse me, not player, but any parent or coach, before you say anything to an umpire or the other stands or the coach or things like that, are you saying it for you or are you saying it because it's the best thing for your kid? And if you could take a step back and breathe and go, okay, before I say something, let me think of this, you wouldn't say it. You wouldn't. It's a byproduct of nervous energy, your commitment to these financial things that you do to your kids, for your kids, and putting them out there. It's a byproduct of that. Truly, before you say anything, am I saying it for me or am I saying it for them? And if you're going to berate an umpire or the other fans or things like that, like, why are you doing it? Like, why? I mean, as an adult, do you really want to go out there and fist fight? Because that's what it leads to. Enjoy the fact that your kid is healthy enough to play. Do you know how many kids in America or worldwide would love to play sports, but they're born in a wheelchair? Or they're born with one arm? Or they're sick, they have cancer, they can't play. It's a game. It is a game. It is a privilege to play this game. I am, thank God, every day that my kids are healthy enough to play and that they want to play. I am not going to ruin that because I have to get involved, and it has to be more about me than about them. It's their experience. It's their life. I don't tell my kids, hey, we're going down to take BP. Hey, can we go hit? Yep, let's go. When I'm at the games, I don't say a word. And neither does my wife. And I'm very proud of her about that because she's not a sports person. She doesn't really care for it, but she's a loving mother that would do anything for her kids. She enjoys watching her kids play, win or lose, win or lose. You've been around this game long enough to know you're not going to win every game. And sometimes you're going to play horrible and you're going to win. And there are going to be times you play really great and you're going to lose. It's about the process with your kid. It's about spending time with your kid who's healthy enough to play a sport. And it's going to go like that. My daughter is going to college next year to play. She's going to college. I still remember her first T-ball game, and it went like that. And I wish to God I could have that back. I thank everybody that had any part to do with the ability for our family to enjoy our time during that. All the tournament directors, the tournament companies, the leagues, the umpires, whoever gave their time, because a lot of these people are volunteers, especially when you get into league play and stuff like that. They gave us an avenue for me to enjoy my family. So how am I going to repay them? Yelling and screaming at their employees and things like that? Like, seriously, enjoy your family. Enjoy your family. Because that's what it's all about. When my daughter goes to college next year, I went and I spoke to the college coach when she signed. And I told my daughter after we got done with the deal, I go, hey, can you go wait outside? I want to talk to coach. And you could see her face. She was like, oh my God, the coach was. She was like, oh God, here we go. And so my daughter walked out. I said, my kid's committed to you for 2 years. I go, I'm giving you an 18-year-old kid. I want a 20-year-old adult back in 2 years. I go, I don't care how you do it. I don't care if she plays every inning. I don't care if she ever plays. I want a 20-year-old kid with a 2-year college degree to be able to go somewhere else. I will never once complain about playing time. I won't complain about the way you do your job. And I go, if my kid comes back home and complains it's too hard, I'm going to put her back in the car and I'm going to take her back. Because that's what it's all about. Allowing this person who's invested in my kid to do their job. Think about all the high school coaches that have to deal with parents that are like, oh, you got it out for my kid. You're not playing my kid, this, that, and the other. These coaches are trying to win.
Yes.
There's no coach that hates your kid enough that he will not play him for a worse player. It doesn't happen. But everybody assumes that they're a subject matter expert at this sport and that the coaches don't know what they're doing and the umpires don't know what they're doing. And man, let people do their job. Let people who took the time to volunteer to coach your kid. You know as well as I do, those high school coaches, they're losing money.
Yes.
They're losing money.
Yep.
They're not making anything. By the time they get their paycheck, they've invested so much of their time and their money and their gas and all those things, they're losing money. They literally have chosen to invest in your kid. Even the worst coach my daughter's ever had has been the best coach. He or she could be totally incompetent, but they chose to spend time with my kid when they could have been with their own family. So I think it's about perspective, man, and knowing that your kid's healthy enough to play, enjoying the fact that you get to watch your kid play, because what are you going to do after your kid's done playing? You're going to go yell at somebody else's umpires? Like, seriously, is it that important that where that's kind of your thing, that you're going to go to your, hey, I'm just going to go
anxiety release
and yell at people, so
man, and follow the golden rule. Follow, that solves everything. Just follow the golden rule.
Hey, we learned it all in kindergarten, didn't we? Keep your hands to yourself, be nice to other people.
Yep.
I mean, if you could do those two, I mean, you're probably going to be all right.
Timmy, I appreciate your time, man. Good luck with the rest of the season. Hopefully I see you here in the postseason, but thanks for your time.
Yeah, hey, and I want to let everybody know this. The reason I did this interview is because of you. Because you have always been good to umpires. You have always treated me with respect, and I've saw you do that to my peers. I would not do this for everybody. I would not.
Appreciate it.
And I hope that by this conversation that somebody thinks differently. And I hope that somebody thinks outside the box and went, you know what, maybe these two guys are onto something. Maybe I should change the way I act at youth league games.
We all can save it. Man, again, you got to throw it back. Hey, we can save baseball if we handle it right. And it's going to kill youth baseball if we don't handle it right.
Correct. Maybe I could treat the coach with respect, even if I disagree with what he's doing. Yep. Maybe I can teach my kid to not be a victim and that everything that goes against them is not their fault. Yep. Like, prepare your kid, be nice, and enjoy the process. And that's the reason I did this interview, because you practice what you preach.
I appreciate it.
You really do. And I'm going to tell you right now, those people that don't know this, when you called me to go speak at that conference, I said yes right away. Because of you, because of your mentality and the way you approach this game. If everybody else can do that going forward, baseball will thrive. Softball will thrive. If we choose to go backwards and go back to the archaic days, we are going to die on the vine, and this sport will not last. I cannot tell people that enough, and you know that, and I know that. Yep. People need to adjust the way they're thinking. They really do.
Thank you, sir.
Coach, I appreciate it, man. Thank you. Have a great day.